We're back here on Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Tyler Zeman, and I'm joined by a co-host this week. It's Logan Lepiscopo. We're going to break down the action that was Waynesburg Athletics last week, and we'll start with the baseball team. They went 4-2 to open up PAC play. Very impressive stuff. Given where they were ranked in the preseason polls, this is a team that I think has kind of made a little bit of waves in the first week, putting up 4 wins against PAC teams.
Yeah, before we get into baseball, Tyler, I'm glad that I was able to join you this week, being that you were by yourself last week. But this baseball team definitely has gone off to a solid start, as you mentioned, 4-2 in conference play. Now, we still are very early on in the season. They still have not played some of the top teams in baseball like Washington, Jefferson, and other names to mention. But the Presidents have been dominating. It'll be interesting to see how Waynesburg does against them when it gets to that point. But the doubleheader against Franciscan was their most recent game, and the bats were rolling. There actually was kind of a rhythm between the pitchers there and Dalton Lucy and Bryce Badillion. So I think this team coming out strong 4-2 in the conference is definitely a big morale booster for them.
Yeah, so you kind of talked about it. The pop and the bats, 11 home runs in PAC play so far. They lead the PAC with that stat. The second best team is W&J. They only have 8 home runs on the season. So this Waynesburg team is starting to see the ball pretty well at the start of the season. They will see Geneva this week in a doubleheader, and then they will see Bethany this week on the road at Bethany on Saturday. Only 4 games this week for the baseball team, but we want to talk about a beast, a powerful juggernaut that just cannot be stopped. It's this Waynesburg University softball team. A 7-game win streak. They're 4-0 in the PAC, and no one has been able to slow them down at all.
Yeah, and when you talk about slowing them down, you can't even say it's just the pitching. It's also the bats rolling. Ella Brookman's been batting phenomenal. She's one of the best in all of D3 softball in terms of hitting, with her batting average up in like the 500, 600 range. So she's been doing phenomenal. A lot of the other members of the team are above that 300 threshold. So Autumn Stemple, Cindy Wilson, taking care of business on the mound, but also the batters, stepping in the batter's box for Waynesburg, have been doing phenomenal as well. Their last doubleheader was a PAC matchup as well. This one against Chatham, an 8-0 victory in Game 1, and then a 7-2 victory in Game 2. You can't forget to mention Grace Higgins. She was a home run away in that second game from completing the cycle. She had a single, double, and triple in that one. So this team all around, from the freshmen to the seniors, has just been playing exceptional.
Yeah, their base running is absolutely insane, and the leader in that is pretty much Bryn Hunter, who had an exceptional week this past week for the Jackets. But like you mentioned, the pitching duo has been unstoppable. Stemple got the win in Game 1 in that she goes to 5-1 on the season. Cindy Wilson got the save in Game 1, and then Cindy Wilson went out and pitched 5 innings, got the win there, and advanced to 7-2 record. They will be at Franciscan this week, and then they will see W&J. So again, 2 more PAC games for this team that just has been unbelievable so far. Now on to track and field. Track and field, they went up to Slippery Rock this past weekend, and Tyreek Williams, man, the freshman, he stood out, posted the best place in Division III athletes at the meet. Just unreal from him.
Yeah, Tyreek Williams is a refreshing name for us when it comes to the track and field picture. Usually we're just used to seeing Catherine Henderson in the headlines, seeing all of her records that she's been breaking. But Tyreek Williams, to be able to place as the best time in D3 means that there were higher competition levels that he was facing, D2, D1 schools. So for him to go out, post that time against all other PAC, other D3 schools there is very impressive. And as I alluded to, Catherine Henderson also placing 3rd in her long jump event. So she's picking up some more events in this outdoor season. I'm sure we are more than intrigued to see what happens this year when it comes to that national times or even PAC championship times.
Yeah, and Catherine Henderson will be at Kutztown University, not this week, but next week, April 12th and April 13th. She's competing on her own, doing the pentathlon, hoping to, place very well and get into the national ranking so she can compete at nationals, something that she did in the indoor season, and if she can do it in the outdoor season, that's just really, really impressive from her. Meg Berry also did really well in the javelin throw. She placed 8th there. The only people to finish above her were Division II athletes, so one of the best in Division III in the javelin throwing at the competition. They will be at Westminster this weekend. Although there's only a select few going due to it being Easter weekend, some of them will be there competing to better their distances or times that they have set so far this season. Women's lacrosse, though, they didn't have the best showing last time out. They lost 20-2 against Allegheny. 2-5 on the season, 0-2 in the pack so far. But I mean, it's still been a great year. Tori Michael-John is continuing her success. She got another goal in that matchup. It's not the result that they wanted, but it's still impressive stuff from them.
Yeah, obviously a 20-2 loss is nothing you ever want to see. But this lacrosse team has a new head coach, Steph London. She actually has some playing experience herself when it comes to lacrosse. So she's there kind of as obviously the coach, but also kind of a teammate with them, teaching them all these new things that they may not have had before with a coach that has actual college lacrosse playing experience. So obviously 20-2 loss, not what you want to see. But to have 2 wins on the season, I will pat myself on the back here. Got to announce a lacrosse win, which is not very often here at Waynesburg. So the team has to be proud of obviously 2 wins so far. Hopefully they're going to look to add some more to that. Perhaps be one of the best seasons they've had in history.
Yeah, continuing on with other sports that were in action last week. The women's golf team, they were supposed to go to the Grove City Invitational on Saturday. That was postponed due to weather. The men's golf team, though, they were at the Grove City Invitational on Thursday. They placed 9th out of 11 teams that were there. They shot a .342 as a team. They will be in action this Wednesday at Bethany to compete in that invitational. Tennis, it wasn't the best week for them. They lost 8-1 to PAC Faux Geneva last Thursday. Mike Saliba, he got the lone victory last time they were in action in the doubles match. This time he did it on his own in a solos match. He got their only win. He beat Nick Heidengren from Geneva. They will they will host Westminster this Wednesday at 3:30. And Logan, to wrap up the segment, talk about esports.
You know, esports hasn't gotten enough love here on JSW, but the team's obviously playing up in a lot of levels in terms of Rocket League, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Valorant team also picking things up as well. So coming up as of the time we're recording would be today. So tomorrow, to those watching, the Valorant team played against King's College and New England as well. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has a cruise match, which will be the day that you are seeing this, against New England Tech. So both of the squads there will be going in competition. Rocket League up in the higher division now, facing a lot tougher competition, but they are still continuing to do what they did last year in terms of having a very successful season.
Yeah, the spring sports are definitely in full swing here at Waynesburg, and we still have a lot to cover here on Jacket Sports Weekly. Up next, we will be joined by Spencer Frattare, who will break down what he saw from the baseball team this past week. Don't go anywhere. Back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, and we are now joined by our first analyst, Spencer Frattare, to break down the baseball team's week this past week. They went 4-2, Spencer, to open PAC play, which I think is fair to say something that most people didn't really expect, being that they faced some pretty good baseball teams to open this first week of play.
Yeah, and guys, when we think of baseball and softball here, I mean, the softball team is obviously a lot better. I mean, they did great last year. They're already doing good this year. The baseball team, though, coming out and surprising people, starting 4-2. I had the honor of announcing the first PAC game this year for them, and that's a game they should have won. I think they should be 5-1. That first game against Vincent, they were up 3-0 in the third inning. They ended up losing the lead and ended up ultimately losing 5-6. But 4-2 in the conference. They play 4 more, so they play Geneva and Bethany. I think we could see a Waynesburg team that could potentially, I'm not going to say they will, I'm going to say potentially start out 8-2 in the PAC.
So looking at the PAC play, obviously tied 4th right now with Westminster, but looking at the most recent doubleheader against Franciscan, The bats were rolling. We actually kind of found some rhythm within our pitchers there. So talk a little bit about the side of the bats. Excellent hitting from basically everybody in the lineup.
Yeah, 3 homers in that game. Alec Engelmore had one. Seth Bergdahl had his second of the year. And then Lane Hours had that 2-run homer. That first game was a little bit closer, but that second game against Franciscan, that 16-4 dominant win, there was doubles, triples, those 3 home runs, as I mentioned. There was about 6 or 7 RBIs. It was just a really, really dominant performance. And again, I think I could speak for you guys when I say we're a little surprised to see Waynesburg coming out of the gate so early, looking so good in the PAC.
Yeah, so obviously we talked about it. 9 out of the 10 batters that stepped up to the plate in the first game recorded a hit, and then in the second one, 12 of the 14 that stepped up to the plate also got a hit. So just talk about this team. If they can continue to keep the consistency and everybody, whenever they step up to the plate, can kind of pass the barrel along, how dangerous can this team be?
Well, this team has the potential to be one of the best teams in the PAC. And I know I may sound crazy saying that because you've got teams like WJ, Geneva's very good this year, Bethany's been pretty decent. But, I mean, there are guys, Lane Hours is a great example. If you get his 3 or 4 games ago, he went 0 for 5. Then you come back against Franciscan, he's got a 2-run homer. He had a double that game. It's the fact that they can bounce back. This is a very young team still. There's not too many seniors who get to start on this team. It's a younger team led by freshman and sophomore. But it's a team that strives in the big moments. And that 16-4 win is a huge win. The bats were rolling in both games. 14 home runs in the PAC. That leads the PAC. The next closest team is W&J with 8. If this continues to keep up, they will be a very, very dangerous team in the PAC.
So moving away from the bats and looking at the pitching side, obviously we haven't seen a true ace pitcher for this team so far this season, but Dalton Lucy looked pretty good in that first game against Franciscan. And then if you look at the second game, Bryce Badillion also had a pretty decent game as well. So touch a little bit on what has been the pitching for Waynesburg so far this year.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Logan, we don't really have an ace here at Waynesburg. I mean, Bryce Badillion is very solid. Ethan Earhart, Aiden Williams, Dalton Lucy, as you mentioned. I would want to cover Aiden Williams, more the sophomore. He's had a great year so far. It's very early in the year. I think he's going to turn out to be their number 1 guy, but I don't really see a clear-cut number 1 guy. Like I mentioned, Ethan Earhart's very good. He's only a freshman. Dalton Lucy, the freshman, they're both having great seasons. And then Bryce Badillion, who usually plays center field, came in and pitched that one game and played very well. So there's a lot of solid and very lethal pitchers on this Waynesburg baseball team.
Yeah, they're just a little bit young. What do you think they need to do to continue to keep the momentum that they have right now with this 2-game sweep against Franciscan? Obviously, you mentioned it, Williams didn't make an appearance in this one. It was Badillion in the second game and then Lucy in the first game. So what do the others need to do to continue to keep this rolling?
Well, to keep the momentum going, guys, is like I said, they have their next 4 games all PAC. If Waynesburg can go out and somehow win those next 4, which I think they're winnable games, Geneva and Bethany, they're not powerhouses in baseball PAC that we know of, WJ. But if they can go out and win the next 4, start off 8-2, you're going to have teams thinking, you're going to have teams like, oh, wow, Waynesburg 8-2, they're a little scary this year. I think it's this stretch as a whole was big. They played 3 straight PAC games, and now you play 2 more straight with Geneva and Bethany. Like I said, I'm going to keep reiterating, if they can beat Geneva and Bethany, look out, this team could go on a run.
So obviously they're playing kind of guys that are lower in terms of PAC ballot where they're ranked in the preseason polls, but to be able to get those wins is very important. One thing I want to mention, and kind of forcing you to look at the negative side of things, runners left on and errors has been kind of a huge downside to this team, and the reason why they're not better than what they are. In that first game you mentioned, Franciscan was much closer, 5-2 victory. They had 4 errors by 4 different guys in that game. So how can Waynesburg clean up that fielding, but also, even though the bats are rolling, how can they get those runners not stranded on base?
It's not even just much the fielders. It's more of the batters. And I know you and I talk about it when we announce a lot. Waynesburg, the men's baseball team, averages about 9 or 10 runners left on. Now, so far, they've been winning the PAC games. But, for instance, that first Vincent game, that first PAC matchup, they had 11 runners left on. They lost by 1. So you've got to think, I mean, that's a number that I've reiterated this over the broadcast. I'll reiterate it now. That's a number they have to get down. They're 8-12 right now. They could be 12-8. They could be 14-6. I mean, with the amount of runners being left on base, this is a team that if they can get that number down, the wins will start coming a lot more easier.
So through this past week, what's one guy that has really stood out to you that maybe we haven't given as much credit for the success that Waynesburg's had?
I don't know if he's been talked about a lot, but give me Seth Bergdahl, the catcher, who's been having a great year. I wasn't really too high on him going into the year. I was very skeptical. To be honest, I really didn't even know he played baseball. I have him in 2 or 3 of my classes, and then I announced my first baseball game, and that's when I had found out he was the catcher. And, I mean, his first game I announced, he cranked one out in center field, a home run. He threw 2 guys out that inning. Seth Bergdahl is a key, and especially at the catcher position, you have someone who can lead the charge, especially if your pitcher's not doing well. But Seth Bergdahl is having a great year. If he can keep that up, the team will follow behind that.
Well, thank you, Spencer. When we come back, we will go to the softball field to talk about what this Waynesburg University softball team has been doing. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. Now we jump into the softball team, and joining Tyler and I, Ethan Spozarski. Welcome to join us on the panel for this week's episode. So softball team off to another hot start, just as they were last year. 13-3 overall currently, 4-0 in the conference. And their last game was against Chatham, a doubleheader. Talk a little bit about those games against Chatham.
Chatham. It was a dominant outing for the women's in both game. The women came out. Sydney Wilson started out the first game pitching really good softball. Autumn Stemple started for the second game, and then Sydney came in and finished the last 2 innings. Both performances excellent. They only allowed 4 runs in both games. They also were able to produce 18 runs for themselves in both games as well. So no, the team is really doing well. The bats are getting hot. Even younger players in our depth in our lineup, they're getting starts in the second game, are really getting on base, they're getting hits, and then they're coming home as well. So really doing good, especially on this homestand that they've been dealt with as well, despite the 2 teal games that are away. The homestand has been really good. 2 games they've have led to mercy rolls. So really good stuff, especially on the offensive side of the plate for the Yellow Jackets.
Now, obviously, in the doubleheader versus Chatham, this wasn't the case, but a glaring thing that stands out to me is how many runners they've left on base, not just in that doubleheader because, they didn't really need the runs, but they did leave 9 on in the first game. They won it 8-0, and then the second game they won it 7-2, so they got it done without really needing those batters to come home. But across the previous games, that's been one of the big problems. Do you see them being able to fix that, or is this something that it just comes with time? Like, as these bats continue to heat up and keep on rolling, things get better.
Yeah, I'm not really too concerned about it personally as a fan. I think if you're putting up anywhere between 7 and 11 runs in a singular game, if you leave a few on, it's going to happen. It's not really that much of a big deal unless you're the Pittsburgh Pirates where you can't produce any runs and leave 16 guys on base. That's where the problem lies. But they're getting runs, period. That's what's important for this team. I think it's very important to produce like 10 players with over 300 batting average, and they got 4 players with over 200 batting average. Only 2 players that are in the 100s right now, and then they have another 2 who haven't hit at all really. But again, they're not really getting a lot of games and starts, so you're not going to really look at that, and that's not going to affect the team as a whole. But they also, they're really good on base, and then they're also good getting on base. So I'm not really too concerned with that as a fan, and especially if I'm a player and a coach. That's more nitpicking right now. If you are scoring with 10 plus runs, which they have done 2 times this year, and they've also scored over 6 runs in 4 other games. So not really a concern for me right now.
Yeah, so obviously we know the pitching's been good, the batting has been good, but the fielding has also been exceptional for the team. Sydney Wilson, Autumn Stemple may not be getting the most strikeouts from game to game. You'll see the double digits, you'll see the 3 to 4, but that's all because the defense helps back them up on the mound. Talk a little bit about like that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no, defensively, the only game that this defense has really struggled was the first game of the season that was at home against La Roche, and that was the last 2 innings. They kind of shot themselves in the foot. They were a few errors, not being able to hold on to balls in the glove, but otherwise they have been really, really good. Autumn Stemple has been that strikeout machine that we've been looking for. 54 strikeouts in her 8 games that she's played, and she started in all 8 games. that she has played in. 54 strikeouts. And Sydney Wilson, to be noted, 51 strikeouts. Still doing really good. They are the top two pitchers, the best two pitchers. Ella Brookman's the only other person they really go on to. But it is that these two are just everything you need in a pitching duo, especially a young pitching duo as well for both these girls. But yeah, no, the fielding has been really, really good. Besides that first LaRoche game where they lost 4-2 in their first home game back after 13 days of being off and a bunch of games being canceled and postponed, which I give a little leeway to. They have been really, really good in the field, making plays out, diving in the outfield, keeping balls in the infield. Grace Higgins has done an exceptional job as well with turning to right to that second base, especially when they need her out there when she's playing shortstop or second. So really good fielding by the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned the pitching duo that they have in Stemple and Wilson. But Stemple, one of those pitchers that whenever they were in Myrtle Beach, she looked on fire. She looked like she was ready for it. She came back, though, here in the first couple games of the season, and it kind of looked like she maybe lost her mojo a little bit, lost a little bit of confidence. But she's been picking it back up. 5-1 on the season. She had 3 strikeouts, only gave up 2 earned runs in the first game of Chatham. What have you seen in her in these past couple of games?
Autumn Stemple. So, since I've been spending a lot more time down the softball field helping out with Bobby Fox and everything, I've been able to talk with some of the team, with the players and stuff, and I got to talk to Autumn. And, she throws the Oakleys on. She's ready to go. She's really getting into it. 33 strikeouts coming into their first game against LaRoche. That's really, really good, and that's all you need. You have the arsenal to get to where you need to be and eliminate the runs that potentially could come home. Not a lot of teams are hitting on them, and when they are, it's later in the game, and they're able to rebound themselves. But back to your question, no, Autumn's getting in that right mindset. She knows what her ability is, and where they know if worse comes to worse, she does have an off day, which every athlete has. You also have Sydney Wilson to come and back you up and limit. She allowed 7 hits, I believe, off their last game. Sydney comes in, allows 2 hits in the 2 innings she was in, and they were able to shut Chatham down. Very important to know you have everything you need to do it, but if you do have an off day, you have someone behind your back, not only one person, but an entire team to help reel you in and finish the games.
So the team's on a 7-game winning streak, 13-3 overall. So far, perfect record in the conference, 4-0. What do you expect going down the road when Waynesburg starts seeing more competition and more PAC play, like Westminster at the top with them as well, obviously reigning PAC champs? Is this team built to be able to withstand Westminster, even though they've looked very dominant as well?
Yeah, no, this Waynesburg team is as good as anybody in the pack, definitely in all of D3 softball, honestly. They're obviously, there's a lot of D3, there's the more D3 schools than there are D1 schools. So, there's a lot of softball teams involved with that. But if we're talking in pack, this team is definitely the best, if not the best. They are really up there. They have a lot of talent. Like I mentioned before, 10 players batting over 300. All of them have at least played 7 games of the 16 they've been in. So they're, again, able to go to that freshman talent of the young players, really get in that. I feel I should mention and will mention someone I want to talk about, Jasmine Damaski. They call her Taz around the bases because how fast she is. She's batting .433, has a 900 slug. She's her on-base percentage is about 48. It's about 48.5. She's 15. She's run for 15 runs, has 13 hits, 4 triples, leads the team. And that just kind of goes to my point. Young talent coming up. Waynesburg's done a really good job of recruiting, preparing for knowing they're going to be losing some girls. Not a lot, but Bryn Hunter being the top one to name, top senior that they will be losing after this year. They're preparing for it. They're able to keep up with all these other teams. I really like Waynesburg's odds in competing with Westminster, especially for the pack.
Well, thank you very much for joining Tyler and I up here. When we come back, we'll sit down with Meg Berry and discuss the outdoor men's and women's track and field teams.
Have you ever been to the Everly Library? If not, you should, because it's great. They have books of all different genres: history, biography, fiction. Try The Evolution of Life, Life of Pi, or Jurassic Park. So what if books aren't your thing? Try movies like Frozen, or TV shows like Lost. Books and DVDs aren't the only thing though. Take a trip to the second floor. Welcome to the Writing Center. These tutors will tell you everything you need to know about writing a paper, and they'll help revise your essays. Now let's head back down. Behold, the Knox Learning Center. Need to print something out 5 minutes before your next class because you procrastinated? No problem. The You can also print off pictures of dogs, because, well, you can. So grab your homework, laptop, and textbook, and study diligently. Bring your lunch too. Actually, you can't. That's illegal. Now you know the Everly Library. Stop by anytime. Seriously, it's open all week.
Welcome back here on Jacket Sports Weekly. We are now joined by Meg Berry to discuss this past weekend's Invitational at Slippery Rock University. Now, Meg, I heard a lot of bad things about the weather up there this weekend. Kind of just talk about how it played into what you guys were able to do.
Yeah, the first half of the meet when we first got there, beautiful weather. It was 60 degrees, the sun was shining, the wind hadn't really picked up yet. But then around 1 o'clock, all of a sudden, it got really bad really fast. The wind was really bad. It was almost 60 mile per hour gust at some point, so that was really messed things up. So for the 100 meter stretch, they said that like there's rules about wind and when you can compete in like high winds and stuff like that. So the wind was so strong that it was against the rule book for them to run into the wind. So they actually had to flip the 100 meter stretch finish line to be where the start line was so that they were able to run with the wind in the rule book. So that right there just shows like how bad the weather was. We were even put on a delay because there was a thunderstorm that came in. So we had like an hour and a half worth of just sitting around in the bus waiting for this weather to pass. But even when the weather did pass, the temperature dropped from 65 degrees to 42 degrees in 10 minutes. So for the second half of the meet, it was really tough to compete for a lot of those athletes.
Yeah, so obviously runners were definitely going to be affected by that, but especially as throwers, you're going to be affected by that wind. One guy that was not affected by the weather was Tyreek Williams. He had an incredible day, having the best time out of any D3 athlete there in the 110-meter hurdles. Talk a little bit about Tyreek Williams. We've heard all about Kat Henderson and all the amazing things she's done, but Tyreek Williams now on the team. Talk about what he's been able to do so far.
Like you said, Logan, he had the best time as the 110 hurdles, but on top of that, he placed the highest out of all the D3 athletes there. So his second place finish in the 110-meter hurdles was the highest place finish out of all the D3 athletes, which that right there is just something he should really hold his head up about and something he should be extremely proud about. Like you said, he was competing against all these D2 athletes and a couple D1 schools. So just to go out there and compete the way that he did and to just prove himself and to not let the weather be a factor or anything else in his life be a factor, that's just extremely impressive, especially as a freshman who's a dual sport athlete as well. So I think this was a very good start for him, and heading into the later parts of the season, I think it'll really be a confidence booster for him to just show that even bad weather can't stop Tyreek Williams.
Yeah, I was going to say, as an athlete, having that in your back pocket heading into some of these meets down the season, especially competing against other Division III athletes in the PAC, it's got to give him a vote of confidence going forward.
And it definitely does, because there's a lot of 110-meter hurdles, especially on the men's side, that are extremely good, both of them being from Westminster. So to have that confidence of beating one of the Westminster athletes, and I think beating both of them, actually. He beat both the Westminster hurdlers this weekend as a freshman, and both the Westminster hurdlers are seniors and fifth-year seniors. So to just have that, like you said, Tyler, that confidence heading into later in the season, it's definitely going to help him and carry him heading to PAX.
So I alluded to her name. Obviously, we have to still talk about her. Katherine Henderson. She placed third in long jump at this meet, but also coming up, she's picking up even more events during the outdoor season. Talk about what event she has coming up when she goes to Kutztown.
So she is going to Kutztown this weekend, not this weekend, the following week. It's the 12th and the 13th. It's a Wednesday-Thursday meet. That is when she will compete in the heptathlon for the first time this season. So like I said before, that's a 7-event meet. And what it is it's 4 events one day and 3 the next. They break it up just because 7 events in one day, that's A, a long day, and B, that's like physically impossible. So she has that coming up. It's going to be a little hard for her because she is the only Waynesburg University athlete competing, but we're sending some other athletes up with her to cheer her on. But this year, I know for a fact that her goal is to go and have a great first heptathlon meet so that she can be nationally ranked already straight out of the gates, because she wants to go to nationals for the heptathlon, just like she did for the indoor pentathlon. So that's definitely her end goal. So I can definitely see her dedication probably rising up even more than it already has starting into this weekend later in the next.
And obviously we have to talk about it. You had a pretty good throw yourself in the javelin, placed 8th overall. Just talk about the throw this weekend and how you can continue to build forward off of the first place that you got last time out.
Yeah, so definitely after the meet, I was really mad at myself. I won't lie. I didn't like my distance. I wasn't proud of myself at all. But then when I looked at the results, I realized everybody who was placing in front of me were D2 athletes in the PSAC. So to realize that I had beat every PAC school athlete there, that was a really good confidence booster. It made me realize that I was doing better than I thought I was. And on top of that, I was making the best of what I had with the weather. When it had come time for me to throw, it was raining sideways, the wind was really bad, and it was freezing cold. Like, my body was cold to the bone. So I definitely was frustrated at first, but once I sat down and looked at it all, I realized that I did a lot better than I expected to. But this weekend, heading into Westminster, I definitely just hoping for better weather so that I can get a good throw under my belt and to keep pushing forward here.
Yeah, so you just mentioned the next meet, Westminster, will be over Easter break. So obviously only certain individuals you mentioned before we came on the show would be going. Who are some people that maybe you know of, maybe don't know of, that will be going to this meet and taking part in it at Westminster?
So I'm going, a couple other throwers are going. Garrett Hillard, John Stewart, and Aiden Sheely are going on the throws side. Along for the track, Tyreek Williams, Claire Klaus, Michaela Rose, and obviously Kat Henderson are just some of the people that are competing in this meet. A lot of people are still balancing out what they're doing over Easter. It's a hard time to have a track meet, but the weather's supposed to be nice. Westminster has a really good facility, so at this point it's just taking advantage of having another meet.
Well, thank you, Meg, and thank you to all of our analysts that joined us on today's episode. For our producer, Joe Venzel, Logan Lepiscopo, and myself, Tyler Zeman, we wish you a good night. And remember, you can catch all episodes of Jacket Sports Weekly on the YouTube page, or you can catch us live on the cable channel every Tuesday at 7 p.m.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community